morning. So today we're going to read the final chapter of Homer Price. It's called The Wheels of Progress. We're going to let a couple people hop on real quick. So admittedly, this has taken a little bit longer than I expected, but at any rate, we're here to read the final chapter. It's been a lot of interesting days. I'm sure everybody's had interesting days. So started a new job, so that kind of has reorganized my schedule. And so I think from here on, the next book that I read is going to be Hatchet. I'm going to try and do that first thing in the morning, because that seems to be the only time of day that I have that I get to dictate. So with that, we got one person on. We'll go ahead and get this thing started. Wheels of Progress. "I can't go fishing today, Freddie," said Homer, "because I'm helping Uncle Ulysses down at the lunchroom. Seems as though the fish ought to be biting on a day like this." "Do you think your Uncle Ulysses could use an extra helper today, Homer? Because it isn't imperative that I have to go fishing. I just thought if you weren't busy." "Gosh, Freddie, Uncle Ulysses would like it. He always says the more help the merrier, but Aunt Aggie says too many cooks spoil the soup sort of person, and she says she's sick and tired of seeing more people behind the counter than in front of it." "Okay, Homer," said Freddie with a sigh. "I'll see you tomorrow. Bring me a couple of donuts if you can." When Homer entered the lunchroom, there was Uncle Ulysses puttering with one of his labor-saving devices. "Hello, Homer," he said. "You're just in time to help me adjust the timing mechanism in this electric toaster. When you want the toast to come out light brown, it comes out nut brown, and vice versa." Homer and Ulysses tinkered with the toaster and then tried several pieces of toast. Then they tinkered with the mechanism some more. "How is the donut machine working these days, Uncle Ulysses?" said Homer. "Just fine," said Uncle Ulysses. "We're selling more donuts than ever with that new recipe. I suppose you've heard the lady who gave us the old family recipe, the lady who lost her bracelet in the batter? She lives in Centerburg now. She's Naomi Enders, a great-great-great-granddaughter of Ezekiel Enders, the first settler of Centerburg. She inherited all of the Enders property when Luke Enders died. She owns the mill and the patent medicine company now, and is living in the big Enders homestead at the edge of town. She stops by for donuts almost every day. One of my best customers she is." "Yep," said Homer. "The judge mentioned that she had come to live in Centerburg. He said that she was a public-spirited person and would be an addition to the town." "She appreciates good food," said Uncle Ulysses, tasting a piece of nut-brown toast. "And what's more, she has a receptive mind, receptive to the new devices and up-and-coming ideas." A car stopped out in front, and Uncle Ulysses peered out and said, "Well, here she is now, Homer. Better start packing 2 dozen donuts to take out." "Good afternoon," said Miss Enders. "Hello, Homer. I haven't seen you since the night my bracelet disappeared." "Hello, Miss Enders," said Homer. "How do you like living in Centerburg?" "I think it's a marvelous town, simply marvelous," replied Miss Enders. "I've been thinking of what I could do to show my appreciation for the way the people of Centerburg have received me. Everyone has been so kind, simply marvelous. I've just been talking to the judge, and he has informed me that there is a growing house shortage and that people are having difficulty finding places to live. I've decided that a nice way of showing my appreciation would be to build a few homes on the family property. They could be replicas of the Enders homestead, a sort of monument, and I could rent them reasonably to the deserving families." Said Uncle Ulysses, stroking his chin. "Good idea, Miss Enders. Good idea." Homer agreed, and while he counted out 2 dozen donuts, he thought of the fun there would be, walking rafters and joists in these new houses. Uncle Ulysses started stroking his chin and said, "I'll tell you, Miss Enders, it wouldn't do any harm to have more modern houses than the homestead." "Of course," said Miss Enders, "modern plumbing." Uncle Ulysses went back to stroking his chin and said, "And modern kitchen equipment," said Miss Enders, as though she knew that would bring instant approval from Uncle Ulysses. "Mm-hmm," said Uncle Ulysses as he stroked his chin from left to right. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "These are changing times, Miss Enders, and we're living in an age of idea and production genius. Now take the way we used to make donuts, for instance, each one cooked by hand, and all of that time and bother. Now we have this wonderful machine, makes donuts just like that," said Uncle Ulysses, snapping his fingers. Snap, snap, snap. "It's marvelous," said Miss Enders. "Simply marvelous." "Mm-hmm," continued Uncle Ulysses. "Now take the matter of houses, the way we used to build houses. Saw up each board, hammer in nails one at a time, every little shingle and doorknob fastened by hand. But now," said Uncle Ulysses, "with up-and-coming ideas and modern production genius, houses can be built just like this here machine makes donuts." And he made a broad sweep with his right arm. "That's the principle," pronounced Uncle Ulysses, while Miss Enders and Homer gazed in wide-eyed wonder. "That's the principle that Henry Ford applied to making autos. Yep, autos are mass-produced like donuts. Ships are built like donuts, airplanes and refrigerators, and now houses. Yes, sir-ree, the modern house ought to be mass-produced, just like cars or ships or planes. Yes, sir-ree, mass-produced, just like that there machine making donuts." And here Uncle Ulysses snapped his fingers. Snap, 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 and said, "Houses, just like that." Snap. He then stopped waving his arms and talking, and appeared startled that he had talked so much and with so much wisdom. He started stroking his chin again, while Miss Enders, quite visibly impressed, was murmuring, "Marvelous, simply marvelous." Homer counted the 24 donuts again. "Of course," said Uncle Ulysses, "it wouldn't be quite as fast or as easy as making donuts, but with assembly lines and sub-assembly lines and power presses and a touch of ingenuity, that's your recipe. You can bake a house in 24 hours flat." Snap. "Build," said Homer. "Simply marvelous," said the receptive Miss Enders. "Simply marvelous." Homer had heard Uncle Ulysses' pet theories before, and the sheriff and the boys over the barber shop all had heard Uncle Ulysses carry on about the up-and-coming ideas. In fact, arguing about Uncle Ulysses' pet theories had broken up as many pinochle and checker games as arguing about the World Series and women's suffrage put together. That was all that ever happened, though, arguing. But this afternoon, the lunchroom was different. Miss Enders was receptive to Uncle Ulysses' up-and-comingness, and what's more, she had the money to be receptive with the up-and-coming ideas. Almost before the week was up, Miss Enders and the judge, who was her lawyer, and Uncle Ulysses were having conferences. They wrote letters to Detroit, where they have assembly lines and sub-assembly lines and huge presses that can stamp out the whole side of a house, just as easy as stamping out the body of a car or the section of a ship. They hired up-and-coming designers and landscape architects too. Almost before she knew it, Miss Enders had made arrangements for 100 houses, a whole suburb, to be built on the estate around the Enders homestead. As Uncle Ulysses so wisely put it, it don't pay to go all the trouble to mixing the batter and getting the machine hot for 2 or 3 donuts. Might as well make 100 while you're at it. There they are, talking about production and up-and-comingness. The plans were finally finished and the arrangements all made. The workmen arrived at the Enders estate, and then things really began to happen. The trees were chopped down and hauled away. The land was leveled by huge tractors, and the streets were laid out around the old homestead in a day or two. Then the power diggers arrived, right on schedule, and dug one foundation right after another. Sounds like the neighborhood down the street from us. Homer drove over the suburb with Uncle Ulysses and Miss Enders to see how things were going. Uncle Ulysses watched the dirt fly and counted as the machines dug foundation. 72, 73, 74. I tell you, my boy, he said to Homer, you are witnessing the beginning of a new era in city planning and houses. 80, 81. Why, tomorrow they will start to build. By the end of the week, people will live here. Simply marvelous, exclaimed Miss Enders. Just think, last week there were only grass and trees and squirrels on this spot. Everything happened right on schedule, just as Uncle Ulysses has predicted. Huge trucks and trailers drove along the streets, unloaded subassembly sides and floors and roofs of houses, all complete to the last window, doorknob, light bulb, and hot and cold water. It was just a matter of an hour or so before the workmen to fasten the sides and floors together and put on the roof. Here they are, look at that. Just normal practice now, but Uncle Ulysses was up and coming then. As the Centerburg newspaper said in an editorial, truly, we are witnessing a modern miracle. Little did Ezekiel Enders know when he founded this town 150 years ago that such things as this would come to pass. The Centerburg Bugle is sponsoring a 150 years of Centerburg Progress Week to be celebrated when this new part of town is finished. Judge Shank and Miss Enders are heading a committee and handling the celebration. Anyone wishing to take part in the pageant, please get in touch with the committee or call the Bugle office. Toward the end of the week, a truckload of mass-produced furniture is moved into every house. Each front yard had its own climbing rose bush, 2 dwarf cedars, and maple trees, all planted and sodded round about. Each backyard had its mass-produced ash can, birdhouse, complete with weather vane, and a revolving clothesline. In fact, modern production genius that had thought of everything: sheets, towels, pillowcases, and a print of Whistler's mother over every fireplace. There they are, rolling in with the roofs. The houses were complete and ready to be moved into. They were moved into. As you can see, moving in was a little more than signing a paper and hanging your hat on the mass-produced hanger in the hall. Uncle Ulysses was very busy these days, attending to last-minute details. The judge and Miss Enders were working frantically on the pageant for 150 years of Centerburg Progress Week. Uncle Ulysses attended to the street lights and fire plugs, and one afternoon he met Homer on the street and asked, "Have you seen Dulcie Dooner around lately? I have to make arrangements to have street signs put up in the new suburb." "Have you heard, Homer?" he said proudly. "They're going to name one of the streets Ulysses Terrace in honor of me." "Why, yes, Uncle Ulysses. I just saw Dudley coming out of the cigar store around the square." Uncle Ulysses and Homer hurried back to catch Dulcie Dooner, the town street sign putter-upper. "Hi there, Dulcie," shouted Uncle Ulysses. "I'd like to discuss a matter of business with you. Street signs. Street signs for our new suburb." Dulcie turned around and said, "Hi, Ulysses. Hi, Homer. I've been hearing about this new part of town." "It's a great thing for Centerburg," said Uncle Ulysses. "We'll need about 70 street signs, Dulcie. The signs are all made, and they can be fastened to the corner lampposts. We'll pay $1 a sign to have them put up." "Well," said Dulcie, "that's only $70, and I'm not sure that the street sign putter-upper union would agree to that." "But Dulcie, there's almost 30 other signs to put up. That makes $100. The union surely wouldn't object to that." "Yes," said Dulcie, "I know, but I can't fasten the signs to the street corner lamps because the sign putter-upper union rules say that the street sign must be put up by a brother of this here union and must be fastened to a post erected by a brother of this here union, set in the post hole dug by a brother of this here union. The complete union rate is $10 a street sign for the whole post and sign. But we don't need another post on the street corner. The lamppost will do very well, said Uncle Ulysses, growing frantic. Couldn't you arbitrate or something, suggested Homer. Yes, agreed Uncle Ulysses. I'll write the president of your union and ask him. Well, Ulysses, said Dulcie proudly, I'm the president of the street sign putter-uppers union. I'm the secretary-treasurer, too. You see, Ulysses, I make all the union rules, pay all the dues, and collect them, too. So what I say goes. But certainly, you must have up-and-coming ideas like the rest of the citizens of Centerburg. There must be some compromise. Say, $5 a sign? Nope, said Dulcie firmly. It's $10 or nothing. Street sign putter-upping is a seasonal occupation. And I can't run the union on $5 a sign. Well, said Uncle Ulysses, I guess we'll have to make other arrangements. If you make other arrangements, the union will have to picket your new part of town, said Dulcie. Uncle Ulysses began to get mad. Homer hadn't seen him so upset since the night the donut machine wouldn't stop making donuts. He shouted something about Dulcie being a wrench in the wheels of progress, but Dulcie just repeated, $10 apiece or strike. Homer had to rush off before the argument was finished because tonight, Friday, was the dress rehearsal of the pageant. Homer and Freddie and a couple of their friends were taking the part of Indians. They were going to be powdered all over with cocoa, striped with mirachrome, and draped with towels around their middles. The question is, who remembers what mirachrome is? Brody, you know what mirachrome is? Homer had to get a rehearsal night on the dot. Homer had to get rehearsal right on the dot because he started the pageant by rubbing two sticks together and making a fire. Most of the pageant was historical, all about Ezekiel Enders and the founding of Centerburg. The organist of the African Baptist Church wrote the words and music for a long choral work, which the choir was going to sing all the while the pageant was being acted. The rehearsal went very well. The choir was in good voice, and the citizens taking part of Ezekiel Enders and the early settlers performed just right. So did Homer and Freddie and the boys, except for their scalping scene, which had to be modified somewhat. The grand 150 years of Centerburg Progress Week was drawing near. Meanwhile, every one of the 100 houses had been rented to deserving families. Homer hadn't seen Uncle Ulysses in the past 2 days, but he knew he must be having troubles. For one thing, the street signs still hadn't been put up. All of the streets looked alike. This caused some slight confusion to the deserving tenants. The fact that all of the 100 houses looked alike as the 100 donuts added to this slight confusion. However, the deserving tenants soon found that by counting houses from the Enders homestead, they could find their home without much trouble. Freddie's aunt was one of the deserving tenants, and when Freddie and Homer called on her, they had to count 3 houses down from the Enders homestead, 6 houses to the left, to the next house, and the next house to the right was Freddie's aunt's. It was a sort of game, Freddie said to Homer. Miss Enders was proud as punch of her suburb. She decided to call it Enders Heights, even though it was flat as boards. It's marvelous, she said, simply marvelous. The only thing she wasn't happy about was that her place, the homestead, seemed out of place, sitting as it did in the middle of Enders Heights. Uncle Ulysses and a judge agreed that the homestead did stand out like a sore thumb. They decided the best thing to do was move it away and build another house there. It would have to be done quickly, soon, so as to be complete by the time the pageant started. That night, by the time the pageant started that night, Uncle Ulysses late that day ironed out his difficulty with Dulcie Dooner. Dulcie, for $10 a sign and a slight increase for overtime and having to miss the pageant, agreed to have all the signs up by the time the pageant ended that night. Hey, Michelle. There they are, all piled up like cordwood, with the old homestead sticking out like a sore thumb. By 8 o'clock, the town square was crowned. Everyone was there to celebrate the 150 years of Centerburg Progress Week. Promptly at 8:15, Homer, as an Indian, started rubbing sticks together to make fire. After the fire was lighted, Homer, Freddie, and the other Indians left the stage. The judge was commentator, and while the pageant was being acted in pantomime, he read from the history of Enders County. The African Baptist choir chanted in the background. Ezekiel Enders, boomed the judge, set foot on American soil, owning but 2 shillings and an extra shirt, and a formula to make a cough syrup and elixir of life compound that had been handed down to the Enders family for years. Soon after arriving, he took himself a wife and was soon a father of a child. The judge looked up from the text and said, "This child was destined to be the grandfather of our own dear public-spirited citizen, Miss Naomi Enders." Loud applause. The judge continued, "Hearing of the fertile lands to the west, Ezekiel Enders packed up his beloved wife and son and his formula into a covered wagon, and with a few brave followers started toward the west, the land of plenty. Trouble seemed to follow Ezekiel and his brave little band. Their food ran out, game was scarce, and one day they found themselves in the wilderness with no food to sustain life. It was on that day, 150 years ago, in this very spot, that Ezekiel found 42 pounds of edible fungus growing in the forest." Here the African Baptist choir sang out in full, rich harmony. 42 pounds of edible fungus in the wilderness a-growing, saved the settlers from starvation, helped the founding of this nation. 42 pounds of edible fungus in the wilderness a-growing. I am not singing in harmony. Ezekiel took it to be a sign, so he and his followers founded a town in this spot. Ezekiel purchased 2,000 acres of land from the Indians with a jug of cough syrup. They named the town Edible Fungus, and they tilled the land and prospered. Peace and prosperity rested like a benediction on the brave company of the Indians. Having become addicted to Ezekiel's cough syrup and the elixir of life compound, rose in arms against them. Ezekiel buried his supply of the compound in his cabin floor and guarded his formula and his loved ones. In time, the Indians' uprising was quelled, and once more, peace and prosperity came to Edible Fungus. How about that stage there? The choir sang, "Peace again and edible fungus. Prosperity now rests among us." We now skip 75 years to the time Ezekiel's son founded the Enders Patient Medicine Company and the mill. The town had grown and prospered, and its name was changed from Edible Fungus to Centerburg. Loud cheering. The rest of the pageant was very symbolic. Uncle Telly's wife, the former Miss Telward Wiggler, was dressed as the spirit of the water power. Miss Enders was the spirit of cough syrup and vitamin B compound. The ladies of the Grange were the spirits of agriculture. The judge then told the story of the building of Enders Heights, while Aunt Aggie, Uncle Ulysses' wife, dressed as the spirit of progress and the up-and-comingness, hovered on the platform. The celebration ended with a torchlight procession to the Enders Heights. But lo, once again, the peace and comfort of edible fungus, alas Centerburg, i.e. Enders Heights, was threatened. The street signs were not up. The Enders homestead had been moved. Another house, like all of the others, stood in its place. 101 houses, all alike, down to the last doorknob, each with its climbing rose bush, 2 dwarf cedars, and maple tree sodded roundabout. Just as alike as 101 donuts, and nothing to count from to find out which was whose and whose was which. There was a mad scramble, with much shouting, and the deserving tenants trying to frantically find which house was which. The shouting broke into a chant. We want Dulcie, we want Dulcie, we want Dulcie Donner. Uncle Ulysses could do nothing. He had given his plans and diagrams to Dulcie, so the signs could be put up correctly. Miss Enders had another set of plans and diagrams in one of her handbags or somewhere, but it couldn't be located at the moment. We want Dulcie Donner, the crowd roared. The judge began to worry about the reputation of the town. There had never been a lynching in Enders County, he said. It was Homer and Freddie who finally found Dulcie quietly sleeping on a street corner that was just like all the other street corners, except for the post hole Dulcie started to dig. The crowd gathered around. They shook and prodded Dulcie, shouting, "Where are the plans? Where are the diagrams? Where is Ulysses Terrace? Where is Ezekiel Road?" It was soon apparent that Dulcie was more than just asleep. He finally opened one eye and answered all the questions the same, with a shrug of the shoulders. I don't know, and a hiccup. The plans and diagrams couldn't be found. It was Homer and Freddie, still dressed as Indians, of course, who found the little wooden keg near the corner. They smelled it. They tasted it. Freddie shouted, "I know, it's cough syrup and Ezekiel elixir compound," added Homer. Dulcie dug it up. This is where Ezekiel buried it, and this is where the homestead stood. That was it, and it didn't take the worthy tenants long to count their way home. Old Dr. Pelly diagnosed Dulcie's trouble as an overdose of cough syrup and the elixir of life compound, aged over 100 years in a wooden keg. Dulcie was up and about the business of installing street signs late the next day. 150 years of Centerburg Progress Week came to a close with peace and prosperity. There he is. You know, that cough syrup back in the day, a little bit different than it is now. Time and progress move ahead. The Ezekiel Enders homestead moved back to take the place of the 101st house too. You see, the worthy tenants thought up and coming, though up and coming aren't taking any chances. Meanwhile, the whole nation is singing 42 pounds of edible fungus in the wilderness a-growing. Saved the settlers from starvation, helped the founding of a nation. 42 pounds of edible fungus in the wilderness a-growing. Alrighty, well that's it. So my next book's going to be Hatchet, and I'm going to really try to stay on task and do the book more, do the chapters more regimented, I guess you'd say. And probably not going to be able to do a whole chapter at one sitting because the chapters are slightly longer than Homer Price, but we'll figure out it'll be about 20 or 30 minutes at a time. So at any rate, thanks everybody for watching. Hope the kiddos are enjoying this. Y'all have a good one. We're headed to High Falls to hike.